So we're in Oklahoma, so you get an idea of what Oklahoma terrain looks like. Looks a lot like Nebraska and Iowa and other parts of the Midwest. So yeah, here we go. In the distance is Wichita Falls, or Wichita Mountains. At that direction is Fort Sill. Where we're headed is over that direction. Get to where the summer house is. So, here you go. Wichita Mountains in Oklahoma. Alright, so here's my problem. Yeah, I'm really close to Star House. Unfortunately, yeah, can't get there from here. New plan. Trying to see Quanah Parker's house, the Star House. Quanah Parker was one of the last Comanches, his band, to surrender to U.S. forces in the Plains Indian Wars. The little backstory is that 1803 we had the Louisiana Purchase from Napoleon Bonaparte because he needed more money to keep his wars going on over in Europe. So in 1803 we purchased a chunk of land from France, from Napoleon Bonaparte's government, that would eventually become 15 of our states. Quanah Parker, let's think about this a second. 1845, this idea finally gets a title called Manifest Destiny. It's the idea that we're going to keep expanding westward past the Mississippi all the way to the west coast where we already had different cities, and the idea was we need to link up the two areas and populate the middle of the country. One problem though is 1865 comes along, or 1860s come along. We have the Civil War. It doesn't end until 1865. Now, some of the people who didn't want to do the Manifest Destiny kind of concept was influential people like Abraham Lincoln, was he like the 16th president? And then also the 18th president, Ulysses S. Grant, he also did not want keep doing this Manifest Destiny idea of expanding westward. The significant problem with that is it's already populated with the Native Americans. 1865, war ends. Then we kick off with the Plains Indian Wars. This Manifest Destiny pushing westward into the middle of the country. 1875, Quanah Parker's band of Comanches are the last ones of really the war for the Plains Indians. Kind of ends it. Quanah Parker is actually half Indian. His mother was Sarah Parker, was a white settler who moved westward with her family when she was a child. The Comanches attacked, killed a bunch of the Parker family, took her and I think some other Parker family members hostage, ransomed off some of them, I guess, and or killed the ones that they captured. Except they kept Sarah Parker. She gets assimilated into the Comanche culture and becomes a Comanche. Then has a child, 3 or 4 children with a Comanche husband. Quanah Parker being one of her sons. He grows up and becomes a Comanche warrior and is part of this war with the Plains Indians that the U.S. forces has to deal with, right? 1875, his band of Comanches finally surrenders, ends the war. Fast forward 15 years later, 1890, the Star House gets built. Quanah Parker is a pretty influential person in this area of Oklahoma, Texas, the whole area, is settling with the plains. He tries to become a rancher himself. He's also influential with the Indians in the area, and gets a bunch of the ranchers and cattlemen in the area to help build his 1890 his house, the Star House. A couple different stories on the stars. Apparently some of the stars, some people say, were influenced by the fact that Quanah Parker had met so many influential people and all the generals he'd met with all their stars, and so I'm going to have more stars. It's also the concept of, you know, 5-star hotels kind of stuff, because his house becomes influential in the amount of guests and the type of guests he gets, including Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt apparently came out here several times. We go on hunts with Quanah Parker, the Indian who had been influential in the Plains Indian Wars, is now taking our president hunting. Teddy Roosevelt is an influential person. If you think about, he got his big break in publicity because of the Spanish-American War, which was 1898. So 1898, the Spanish-American War lasts all like 3 months, but its significance is that we now rise, as the U.S. rises as the power in the Caribbean because of the things that we got from Spain in the war, which were Cuba and Puerto Rico in the Caribbean. And then on the Pacific, we got Guam and the Philippines. War problems would rise in the Philippines. Whoa, rough road. Would rise in the Philippines. That we get into the Philippine-American War. Different story. So 1898 is also influential, and there's this guy, this Army Medical Corps officer named Walter Reed. Everyone heard of Walter Reed Hospital, the VA center? Walter Reed was influential because at this time period, he's trying to figure out how to stop all the deaths that the U.S.'s forces suffer from disease. There was an event that occurred in Washington, D.C., yellow fever outbreak in 1885, 1880, somewhere in there was a yellow fever outbreak. Walter Reed, as the Army medical officer, is trying to figure out how this is happening. Two competing theories are occurring at this time. It's the miasma theory as well as the germ theory. The miasma theory is that there's this bad air, bad water, something along those lines, and that's what causes disease. But it's competing against microscope, right? The microscope is coming out with these other organisms, and so they developed the germ theory. And that's kind of competing in this time frame with how does disease occur. So Walter Reed, DC, yellow fever outbreak, he's trying to figure out, everyone thinks it was miasma theory, right? So it's got to be the water that these soldiers are drinking in Washington, D.C. area. Turns out that that's not true, we know today, but he figured out that some of the enlisted soldiers were taking this path through this swampy area, and that's where they were getting infected. And the other people who didn't go through that area, the officers and the other enlisted who stayed back at the camp and went a different direction, didn't go through the swampy area, they were drinking that water and they didn't come down with yellow fever. Hey, guess what? Yellow fever isn't from water. Walter Reed, along with all the other soldiers and Teddy Roosevelt, are in Cuba, 1898, Spanish-American War. Walter Reed was sent there to try and stop typhus, because all the typhus disease that was killing all the people, and once again trying to fight this idea of miasma theory and this new theory that was coming out with the germ theory. So he's there in Cuba trying to figure out typhus as well as yellow fever, and he's working with a Cuban doctor, this idea that, hey, there might be something to this germ theory, and they start piecing together and figure out it's mosquitoes, right? Mosquitoes are what's spreading yellow fever. So yeah, there you go. Interesting stuff, interesting times. That house, the Star House, tying back to Quanah Parker and Teddy Roosevelt, and Teddy Roosevelt's exploits in Cuba, and the germ theory and miasma theory, and how we just became as a nation with Manifest Destiny and Louisiana Purchase, and this idea of the Spanish-American War, and how we became a world power in the Caribbean, and our influence growing in the Pacific with the Philippines and Guam. But I couldn't get to Star House. What a drawback. Apparently it's falling apart anyway, because the guy who owns it is doesn't want to restore it or has some issues with restoring it. I'm not sure what's going on there. So we're pushing on. The goal is to get to Roswell, New Mexico. So let's go check out the aliens. Probably stay maybe 2 nights there. And then push on further into Arizona, hide out in Arizona desert. Right now I'm trying to get into warmer areas, trying to get away from the freeze temperature. We're pushing on.
A tongue travel production. Mahogany if you want to, cause you're safe with me, so just stay with me. Oh, every day is like a holiday.